Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Um,
Yeah.
uh, Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. I I have been wearing my uh, headphones all day, and they have been squeezing my head. So I'm actually going to be running you guys through my computer speakers. Let me know if you start getting some weird feedback. If your uh, your sound is getting picked up by my microphone, and I'll switch back to my headphones. But I've developed a bit of a headache, and so I'm trying um, to manage that. So uh, okay, so how are we doing today?
Tired.
Yes, I was just going to say that, Kyla. We're tired. It's been a
I
long week for us, and it's not getting any easier, but today we're tired.
Well, I understand that feeling. Uh, I respect where you guys are coming from. Um, I promise everybody's suffering right along with you. Um, not not that we're suffering like you know, not that you're causing us to suffer. We're all in the same boat. um, so I'm sorry that this isn't all rainbows and unicorns. I wish it was. Um, okay, so anybody else want to check in? Everything going okay?
I guess so, sir.
Yes, drinking water is absolutely, definitely always indicated. So,
Oh,
um,
sorry, I said I guess so. I guess so.
yeah, no, in the chat,
Oh, in
Colette
the
said
chat.
drink water. Yes. So sorry. Yes. Um, so yeah, being getting your hydration better is always going to make you feel better. Surprisingly so sometimes. Um, okay. Uh, so let's just sort of do a quick whip round and make sure that we're all on the same page as to last week's lecture. Okay, so the first piece of this is I want to check in and make sure that what I think I'm teaching is what you guys are learning. So what what do you feel like you got out of the lecture last week? And then, as a follow on to that, what do you feel like isn't clear? What do you need more explanation on?
Everything is okay on my end.
Great, awesome. So, if that's the case, then you would be sounds like you would be the perfect candidate to explain what was taught last week.
I volunteer not to.
So, anybody else before I call on someone?
I could give it a try. I know this week we talked about remoteness.
Well, what I'm asking about is last week. So,
Oh,
yeah.
last week was the other element, causation.
Okay. And what did we learn about causation?
Well, we learned that it has two stages. I mean, yeah, factual causation and proximate cause, and that sometimes there can be multiple causes or intervening causes or simultaneous. I mean, yeah, that's on a multiple. Sorry,
Yeah.
um, is it?
Yeah.
Well,
No, you're right. You're right.
okay, yeah. Um, we also talked about the natural intervening acts. and then sometimes the act of the claimant where they could contribute to their own situation. So
Okay, great. So this is all correct, all well done. Thank you very much, Naomi. Nope, I mispronounced that. It's Naomi, right?
you pronounced it correctly the first time. It doesn't really matter to me.
Okay. Well,
Thank
it matters to me that I pronounce it the way that you do. So
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
um so now that we've sort of checked in, I am assuming from the sort of across the board silence that folks feel relatively comfortable with causation, that there aren't any questions, and that's fine. So let's move on to today's activity, right? And you guys will recall, I've said this before, I'll continue to say it. We'll check in for last week's lectures, and then we'll do an activity with a 2-week look back. So we talked about causation. Now we're going to talk about breach. And I posted a question on e-learning for you. I'm going to put it in the chat for you. And there we go. Write a fact pattern that, if true, would give rise to an inference of res ipsa loquitur. This fact pattern should not match any case that you've read, either in this course or elsewhere, because the point of this exercise is to think about what sorts of events are impossible in the absence of negligence. Okay? So the activity that we're going to do is what's called a think, pair, share. And if we had done this, if you know anything about education, you may have heard of that term before. If we had come to this cold and I had just dropped this prompt on you right now, I would now be giving you a few minutes to work for yourself and to think about what would be responding to the prompt. Because you did that, I hope, prior to class, we're going to go straight on to the pair part of this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. These breakout rooms are going to have at most 3 people in them, maybe as few as 2. And what you're going to do is you're going to take some time. You're going to explain what you've created to your partner or your partners. And then when we reconvene, you are going to explain your partner's fact pattern. Okay? So when you're in the breakout room, you're presenting what you've created. When you come out of the breakout room, you present what your partner created. There's 2 reasons for this. Okay, there's 2. I'm attempting to serve 2 purposes here with this activity. The first one is that as lawyers, it is in your interest, it is good for you to have practice at taking someone else's story and retelling it. Okay. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is to rephrase your partner's story in your own words. I understand if what you need to do is just sort of read off what they give you. I'm not going to hold that against you, but I would encourage you to think about ways that you can do this in a more, that makes it more your own. The other piece of this, the other purpose that is being served here is to lower the stakes. Because I don't know about you guys, but I get really nervous when I am being asked to present my ideas to a group that are going to pick it apart and criticize it, right? Even if the criticism is being meant kindly, even if it is, even if it is friendly and out of a spirit of making things better, I still get very nervous. And so by having you present your partner's ideas, you're not really on the hook, right? We're not talking about your idea. We're talking about someone else's that's being presented through your mouth. And the author of the idea gets to do what I always do in these situations, which is refuse to look at anybody and pretend like none of this is happening, right? Um, so this is the point of why we're doing this. So do you have any questions about what the activity is going to entail?
No, for me, sir, it's quite clear.
Okay. Okay, great. Then I am going to create the breakout rooms for you guys, and these are my usual practice. You're just being assigned automatically, so I don't have any control. I'm not exerting any control over this. This is just random, and they are now open. So please.
Just a quick question to you. Will we be able to share screens in the breakout room?
I'm not sure. I will.
Oh, okay.
I honestly don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
We'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. And I'll send that via text as well. Elon, you can go ahead and go on into a breakout room as well. There's actually someone waiting for you. Uh-oh. Okay. Appreciate that. We are back on the record. So you guys know that I will call on you if I have to, but I always like to give folks an opportunity to volunteer. So if there's anybody who would like to volunteer to go first, I know going first can be scary. So if you're up for it, all right, go ahead. Colette, tell us whose fact pattern you're presenting. Give us the fact pattern and then explain why it meets the standard of res ipsa.
Oh, Lord. All of that. Okay. All right. I am presenting Crispin fact pattern. I didn't know I had to do all of that stuff. All right. Crispin fact pattern goes as there's a construction building, right? There's some construction works going on. The apartment building is about 8 to 10 stories high. They have some cylinder shape concrete that they use as, I think, the corner of the buildings to let it look prettier, stuff like that. They were stuck on each other. They have been doing this for quite some time. Nothing has happened. They weren't wired together. The company did not see it fit to tie them together in any way. So there was a particular day, it was very windy, and one became loose and toppled all the rest, and they fell 8 to 10 stories down. Now, there actually wasn't anybody underneath in the area that it fell, but based on the velocity and the power that it fell, it broke to pieces. They broke to pieces, and one of the pieces was lodged into the spine of a passerby, somebody who was about far, a little bit, a couple meters away from where it happens. And that they were actually outside, the persons were outside of the boundary of the construction.
Mhm.
So that's it. That's the fact pattern. I hope I get everything right. For Crispin, that's the fact pattern that I have. Now, based on receptor, the company should have known that if they did not tie these beams together or cylinder shaped things together, there's a possibility that it would have at some point fell if they're not properly secured, and could injure someone. Doesn't even have to be a passerby, it could be their own worker.
Yeah.
Right. And I felt that it was good enough for the person who was injured to sit back and say, okay, the accident happened and there was enough negligence on the part of the construction company to take care and to ensure that this does not happen.
So this presents, I think, a really interesting issue here. Because to sort of like, let's work through the elements of res ipsa, right? So we have the control element, and that's sort of indisputable, right? The defendant, the construction company, has control over how these cylinders of concrete are managed on their work site. And then the next piece of the puzzle is that there's no explanation other than negligence for the accident. And the thing that I think is really interesting here is that res ipsa assumes that the plaintiff cannot identify the negligent act. Okay, because if the plaintiff can identify the negligent act, there is no need for an inference. The plaintiff just proves that the negligent act occurred, and there you have it, right? But if the plaintiff can't identify the negligent act, then if they can show that there's no non-negligent explanation, then they can raise the inference of negligence. And the reason that I think that this fact pattern is really interesting, right, is that we, right, the omniscient narrators writing this fact pattern, we know what the negligent act is. It's the fact that the construction company doesn't take any steps to tie together these cylindrical concrete pieces. But does the plaintiff know that? And the answer to that question is certainly not at the time that the plaintiff is pleading the case, right? Whether the plaintiff learns that over the course of the litigation is going to depend upon what sorts of disclosure systems are in place in the jurisdiction that the case takes place in. Because whether they get that information is going to depend on whether they can get it from the defendant, right? So I think that the way that we've written the fact pattern sort of through the godlike lens, right? Maybe this doesn't give rise to a res ipsa, because as the gods of this particular situation, we know what the negligent act is. But if we look at it through the lens of what the plaintiff would know, I think this is a very good example of meeting the expectations of the doctrine, right? And in particular of the things that you don't know in order to need to take advantage of res ipsa. So who would like to go next? who would like to go next?
Crispin.
Crispin, you are not required to go with your partner. Certainly, you're welcome to, but you are not required. So, Carla Ray,
Okay.
you had unmuted, so it looked to me like
That
you were
was just a
ready to go.
laugh, sir, because that was funny. That was just a laugh. But I can go.
Please
go
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm presenting Naomi Purcell's her fact pattern.
Okay.
And it was that a plaintiff had gone for surgery. It was his first surgery to have his appendix removed. And subsequently, he got a pain. After he was told the surgery was successful, he got a pain and he decided to get another opinion. And it was discovered that the surgeon had left one of the tools inside of him. Let me make sure that's all the fact patterns. Yes, and that would have given rise as far as Naomi, he filed a claim. Yes. So that would have given rise to res ipsa. Because the tools were in control of the surgeon, and it was his responsibility then to obviously make sure that nothing would have happened. Let me see what else. Yeah, I believe that was it based on the doctrine.
So do you think that the plaintiff needs to make use of res ipsa in this situation? Can the plaintiff not?
That was
point
kind of
to-
obvious.
Yeah.
Prima facie, is it called?
Yeah, so it seems to me that this is sort of the the mirror image of the last fact pattern, in that the plaintiff knows exactly what happened to them, right? That was negligent.
Right.
You left this thing in me, and so it's not necessary to draw upon the inference, because the plaintiff is able to prove conclusively this is what happened.
Oh, right.
And so I think that this is maybe a better to sort of take this fact pattern and put a little twist on it to possibly give rise to a res ipsa, would be, instead of leaving some sort of surgical tool in the patient, after the surgery, the patient develops some sort of sepsis infection, right? And sepsis is it's a bacterial infection that arises from interacting with non-sterile equipment inside of you, right? So that indicates that we can't necessarily figure out what it was that caused the infection, but clearly something went wrong. And so that I think might be a situation where res ipsa would be more in line. So
Right. So that's just what I was gonna say.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. This activity doesn't work without you guys, so I always appreciate the effort that you guys put in, and certainly I hope you understand that when I say we're not quite there yet, this is part of the learning process. So, Crispin, go ahead. You volunteered to go next.
Okay, good afternoon. As you all know, I was in Colette's group. Colette, I'd just like to say I'm sorry if I butcher your facts, because you had a good amount. All right, so Colette's facts dealt with medical negligence. The defendant C woke up one morning and found that she had a lump on her breast. So she went to the doctor, who told her that, well, you need to get this checked out. We're going to do a biopsy on you. And before they received the results, the doctor also recommended her to get a mastectomy just in case it's cancerous. That means they're going to cut off one of her breasts, basically, the one that had a lump. And so she agrees to have the mastectomy, and they cut off her breast. And afterwards, when all that was done, they found out that it wasn't cancerous at all. It was just a lump. And I believe that was basically it.
Okay.
Those are the important facts.
Okay. So how does res ipsa apply?
Well, I believe it does apply because, well, the doctor had control. Well, yes, we can say the doctor did have control over whether or not to cut off her breast. Like he or she was one of the key elements in deciding whether or not to cut off her breast. And hold on, give me a second, please, because
Sure.
I should have written this down. Okay, so basically, the doctor had the claimant, you mean? What do you mean, Naomi? Was that a recent message or was that?
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself, Naomi. What are you asking about the claimant?
Oh, because when he began, he said the defendant woke up and went to go
My
check
bad.
her.
My bad. That's my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I said if he meant the claimant.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to read, like skim through the facts and still tell you guys at the same time.
I appreciate you catching that, Naomi, because I missed it myself. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. So go on, Crispin.
Well, as I was saying, it is the doctor was one of the main persons involved in deciding whether or not her breast should be cut off, and that he did so without even proving that it was truly cancerous. And so basically, well, he was negligent on that part. He had no proof otherwise. It was just an assumption that it was really cancerous at that time.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to point out, right, first of all, this is strictly speaking a case of negligent advice, right? Like the Tumbas case, like the McKay case that it relies on, right? The issue is not that the care provided was poorly done. It's that the recommended course of treatment was not consistent with the doctor's need. With the doctor's needs. The answer. So that's an important piece of the puzzle, right? Is that this is an issue where you also have to deal with sort of the negligent advice standard. I don't think it's very difficult to do, right? Certainly a doctor-patient relationship is a special relationship, and a doctor is engaged in the professional service of providing medical advice. So we clear that hurdle fairly easily. In terms of res ipsa, I come back to what's the negligent act? And the negligent act appears to be not waiting for the biopsy results before the surgery was ordered. What I keep thinking as I think about this is that it seems like this case would turn into a battle of the experts, right? The question would be, does it meet the duty of care? Does it meet the duty of care to preempt the biopsy results? And certainly the plaintiff's going to have an expert that says, yes, it does. The defendant would have an expert that might say, maybe not. And that, I think, is going to be the key issue, right? Again, like we said with Naomi's fact pattern, we can identify the negligent act. I'm not convinced that the plaintiff would need to make use of res ipsa. Okay. But again, right, this is this is hard. And the fact that you guys are sort of going at it and attacking the question in good faith is exactly what I want to see from you guys. So the criticism should not be taken as you guys are falling short of expectations. It's you guys are learning and you're doing exactly what you need to do to learn. Okay. So I was just about to ask, what questions do you have? So go ahead, Colette.
No, what I'm asking is to make it closer to, because after reading after listening to you and looking back at I realized what you're talking about. To get it into the receptor area, it has to be something outside of the box. What if the person went into depression after?
I mean, the issue is still, if we're not changing anything else, the issue is still that we can point to the negligent act, right? The negligent act is the preemptive surgery.
Right.
And the question is going to be, is that choice meeting the duty of care, right? And that's going to be where the expert witnesses come in. The sort of unexpected effects, that's further down the analysis after the question of breach.
Okay.
Because res ipsa is fundamentally a doctrine about breach, right? It's a doctrine that is based on being unable to prove that the duty was breached because you can't point to the specific act that caused the injury. But because we know that something negligent happened, otherwise this accident wouldn't have occurred, then we can infer negligence, right? So let me give you guys an example that sort of, I think, hits this very, very clearly. And it actually comes from one of your classmates, although I can't remember who. But it was a fact pattern that was offered in an earlier tutorial this week. That you go to an amusement park, you get on a roller coaster, and the train jumps the track and flies off. Okay. There is absolutely no reasonable explanation for what happened that is not negligent. However, and before I get to however, you don't know what happened, right? You don't know if there was a maintenance failure. You don't know if the roller coaster operator was running it at too high a speed. You don't know if there were occupancy limits that were exceeded, right? You as the plaintiff do not know why this train jumped the track, but you know that if it were being operated appropriately, it would not have jumped the track, okay? And the second piece of this is that, defendants are not required to take all efforts to prevent harm. They are only required to take reasonable efforts to prevent reasonably foreseeable harm. And so once res ipsa is successfully invoked, once we say roller coasters don't jump the tracks in the absence of negligence, the defendant has the opportunity to rebut that presumption. Okay, the defendant can say, look, we, complied with the manufacturer's instructions on how to operate this roller coaster. We, maintained the appropriate repair and maintenance schedule according to the manufacturer's recommendations. We complied with all the regulatory requirements for inspections and service. And so there's nothing else that we could have reasonably done to prevent this. It's just an accident. And that might rebut the presumption and enable the defendant to escape liability. I have a private question. Can we use this doctrine for the Long Island Railroad case? I mean, I don't think that it matters to the court in Palsgraf, because in Palsgraf, the negligence was admitted, right? There was no question of the railroad's negligence. The question was, did their negligence cause this plaintiff's injury? Okay, but if we were not able to identify the specific sequence of events that led to the scales getting knocked off, yes, I would agree that things don't fall off the wall in the absence of negligence, right? Generally, if something is hung on the wall and it's been hung competently, it stays there. So I think that that's a situation where, on the record as presented in Palsgraf, no, res ipsa does not apply, but you can sort of very easily see how you can change that record to create a situation where it would. So does that answer your question, the person who sent me that message? Great, awesome. We are out of time, but if there's any last quick questions, now is a time to ask them. So here is your shot. Kayla, go ahead.
Sir, this is kind of like an unrelated question, but someone had posed a question if we would be using American cases for our midterms, because you mentioned quite a few of them.
The answer to that is the only American case that I have given you that is not in the textbook is Palsgraf. And I reserve the right to have Palsgraf appear on the exam. Everything else, if it's not in the textbook or not in the worksheets, it is not fair game. Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
There's definitely some places where the book draws on American cases, and you should be familiar with those. But you don't have to go doing a deep dive on American tort law, because that's not how this is going to work. So
Understood. Thank you, sir.
no problem. So just to answer these questions that are in the chat very quickly before we wrap up, a private message: the defendant basically has the opportunity to prove their innocence. Yes, that's what a rebuttable presumption means, is that the plaintiff has met their burden, but the defendant does have an opportunity to come back and say, wait, no, there's another explanation. What is the midterm exam supposed to be on? Basically everything that has been covered up to that point, which is basically going to be negligence. Private message, did we discuss any exam prep? We have not. We are anticipating that the administration will give us our final approval of assessments at the beginning of next week. Can't promise that because things may go haywire, but that's sort of that's the word that has come down, is that we can expect that next week. And then we'll discuss the format for the midterm once that's been done. Okay. Last chance for questions. Going once, going twice. Okay. Then I will let you go. So I'll see you guys next week. Take care and bye.